What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyDropProjects.com, and we got a cast of stars here hanging out with us, internet buddies and friends. And we got some people hanging out in the chat too. Peter Seckler's in here already, trying to help promote the show. Thanks, Peter. Everyone remember to thumbs up and hit the like button. I like that. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. We got Jake's Art Corner here and Marcelino Rodriguez. What is up? And that is what is going on today. We are going to talk about what drives you and probably many other things. So before we start, you guys know where to find me, DonkeyDropProjects.com, Marsh Comics on Twitter and TikTok, if TikTok still exists. And then next to me, we have Mr. Len Jennings. What's up, Len? Where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on YouTube at Newland Media, or also on Instagram and Facebook with the same handle.
Awesome. And then next we have Miss Shell Presto. Where can people find you?
Mrs. Shell Presto.
Mrs. Shell. Sorry about that. I don't actually know how those work. I never have been able to figure that out and remember it. So sorry.
It's all right. It's Miss if you're unmarried, Mrs. if you're married, and some people use Ms. if they're in a weird in-between state or don't want people to know from their title if they are married or unmarried.
All right.
So anyway, you can find me at ascensionepoch.com, all one word, no spaces, heroicadventurefiction.com, all one word, no spaces, and I'm also Shell Presto on most social medias and YouTube.
Awesome. And then next we have Mr. How come they don't have weird ones for that? Mr. Ronnie Gunter. How you doing? Where can people find you?
My name is Ronnie Gunter. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Crimson Owl Comics.
Awesome. I love how everybody's getting so like super branded these days. You guys rock. And speaking about super branded and super awesome, Mr. Peter Palmiotti. What's up, dude? Where can people find you? Peter. He might have froze on us.
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
All right. Well, we'll get back to Peter.
Everybody.
Oh! I hear the voice of Mr. Peter Palmiotti.
A little delay, but yeah. Hey. You can find me on YouTube under Peter Palmiotti, and go subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to grow my channel.
Yeah, do that for sure. And let's see, we got some more people in the chat. Devontae Edwards, what's up? Anna Raub, I don't know how to say your last name very well, sorry, but we know Anna from the Discord. How you doing? Van Illustrations, my buddy, he's also goes by the name of Clay. How you doing? He's got his popcorn ready. And yeah, let's get on to this. Let's see, who do we want to? We'll start with Peter and see if we can get through the delay. Peter, what drives you to create?
Insanity.
Nice.
I grew up with comics, and I just love them, and I've been working in comics, as you know, for a very long time, and I'm glad to be part of a team putting together comics. But now, I'm sort of venturing into unknown territory for me, not only creating my own characters and books, but also, getting other artists involved and basically building a small publishing thing. And it's, why am I driven? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work just to do one book. I have this something about me that really, part of it is I want to show people what I think like how to put together comics like the way I envision it. So I want to get those out there, and maybe other people can pick up on it. Like, there's like better ways to do comics, and hopefully I'll get it right. And so that's part of it. Part of it is, I've been in this industry so long, and I feel like I haven't yet reached like a golden opportunity. I've worked for DC, I worked for Marvel, and that was the goal at a time. But I haven't really worked on my dream project, and I think with Retro, my character, I think this will become my dream project. If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. And it's interesting because for somebody who has worked in comics for so long, it's kind of surprising that you're not so jaded that you're not driven anymore.
I think there's always a goal. There's always, another hill to climb, and really, I've thought about independent comics for most of my career, and doing my own thing. And it's just, it's way past time as I see it. And it's also like I'm really pushing myself in other directions than what I'm mostly known for, which is, I'm mostly known for inking. But I've written stuff, but nothing really published. I've penciled stuff, and it's like, but it's little bits here and there, and I just want to go full on and immerse myself in everything, and
Awesome.
see where it takes me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's cool because, even when I've been kind of down on the comics thing, I've seen you come up with the positive, optimistic attitude, even though you've gone through so much just to do comics. And so, I don't know, it's pretty cool that you remain and you keep staying optimistic about it.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. Ronnie, what drives you to do this stuff? You got a lot of stuff that kind of wants to stop you sometimes, but you keep going.
Yeah. Well, besides the love of being able to take an idea and create it and bring life to it on a piece of paper or on a tablet, is just, as a child, picking up a comic and reading it and just falling in love with the stories and the art itself. I want to be able to create that and be able to bring that to young readers themselves, where they want to be able to be inspired and to be able to make comics themselves. And it's one of those things. I don't desire to be like a big famous comic book creator. Even if it's just 20 people, I want to make an impact on someone's life, no matter how old they are.
That's pretty cool. So it's kind of like it's like you remember the effect it had on you, and you want to like share that experience with people.
Yeah, because I was in special education as a in school, and I had trouble speaking and reading and stuff like that. And comics was one of the places I learned how to read, and pretty much my source of material. I used to do a lot of book reports on comic books instead of other books out there. So yeah, it's very important to me.
Wow, that's really cool. I think that's pretty common. I think if we really think about it, that's probably a lot of our motivations. It comes from kind of an early time, and wanting to share that experience. You kind of share the love and stuff. It's pretty cool. What about you, Shell? What drives you to keep going with this?
The big thing for me is that I always have a running dialogue in my head. Like, you think of characters and then those characters just kind of become a part of you. Like I can't go to the grocery store and be shopping and not thinking of like stories. So my big problem is getting all the stories down and having time to put them in a format where other people can enjoy them. But
Mm.
there have even been like times in my life where I've essentially had it incentivized to not create and I couldn't. Like my mom really wanted me to be like a landscape artist or do florals and stuff like that. And I couldn't, even for like the praise and encouragement of a parent. I always like things better with sci-fi. I always like things better with fantasy. I've had, and this is not an endorsement to like end a relationship on over creative differences, but when you're dating someone, you're weighing stuff that you whether you want to be with that person the rest of your life and stuff. And I've had relationships or dated guys that didn't think much of my creative endeavors, and I've ended relationships over stuff because it's like I need to do part of this, and that's one of the things that Mike and I do. We create together. But I even have a hard time enjoying passively. Like, I can't watch a movie and then not wonder what my characters wouldn't do in the same situation, or wonder, like, well, what if this has happened in the movie instead and had it gone a different way? So I think my brain's just kind of hardwired to create and think about other possibilities. So I don't think I could stop if I wanted to.
Yeah, I've heard that one as well. I think a lot of us can relate with that. Um, it's a compulsion. You can't not do it. Uh, I've definitely felt that way before. What about you, Len? What drives you to do this stuff?
Well, when I was a kid, this is what I wanted to do. And, my parents were really encouraging, put me in private instruction. But, I became an adult. I joined the Army and got college money and put myself through art school. And I even interviewed at Marvel Comics, which I bombed horribly. But it was still a great experience. But I went and, I just became a graphic designer or a creative designer. And I've even done some production art. And my career has just kind of took that, that direction. And then, and I've always done music. That's always been a big part of my life. But my wife, my wife, she's an author. And when she decided in 2014, she separated from our company, and she decided she wanted to be an author. And that kind of changed everything for me. She's always been really supportive of me in my artistic endeavors, and my music endeavors. So I was like, cool, stay home, be an author. And just that, I can kind of relate a lot to what Shell is saying, because I've had this is my third marriage, so I've been in other relationships that were not that didn't work, they didn't serve that purpose, and they ultimately didn't work. But my marriage now, it fuels everything I do. So like last year, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done putting it off. I'm going to do it. So I started doing a lot of looking around on the internet, seeing how it's done as an independent creator, and trying to learn all that stuff. And now I'm just doing it. I guess what drives me is the fact that I put it off for so long. I'm now in a place where I can't not do it.
Yeah, that's cool. Wow, a lot of good answers here today. Let's see what our buddy Clay has to say. Shell, stories are always running in my head too. Kind of a curse when I can't work on them as much as I'd like. Yeah, that's like the bane of all of our existence, right? Trying to want it to work and can't do it. Although I will say I'm in a very different place these days, where it's like I don't know. It's not the greatest place. I almost did this stream selfishly so I could see what your reasons are. Maybe I could find one because I have so much drive usually, and lately I do not have so much drive. And I mean, there's reasons for it, but you know, we have Mr. Fogbreaker Studios. Jason is also hanging out with us. What's up, dude? Thanks for joining us. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I guess I'm trying to think of like what my drive has been. Like, what's the main thing? Well, this is one thing that you guys didn't say that I've said before, and I think it is a big part of my drive is it's weird because I'm a fan of comics, but I'm not like a fan the way most people are. Like I never got this like addicted to reading it and loving the stories kind of thing. And I think it's because of the era I came up in with the Image comics and stuff because the stories just weren't that great, to be honest. So I didn't get addicted to the actual stories as much, but the art was like that was what really caught me. And so I feel like I've read a lot of bad comics, and but at the same time, when I read comics, I see so much potential. And I think that the potential has been met in comics I haven't read, and I hope to one day read those comics. But I see so much potential, and I'm like, I just get excited to like try something new, you know, and build off of a few different kind of influences and see if I can kind of do something interesting that maybe hasn't been done or maybe could be done better or something like that. Do you guys ever feel that way? Like
Totally.
almost
You know, definitely like, when people ask me like what artists inspire you, I could rattle off 1,000 names, but it's like every artist inspires me. The great, fantastic artists that most people know, but also like the not so great artists, the artists that are not, let's just say, not good, because it's like it, there's something about creating, and it's we all have the desire and need to tell stories, even in our everyday lives, and you know i think like it's just I don't know what I'm saying.
well,
I'm just inspired by everything,
yeah.
frankly.
I think it's interesting that you make that distinction because for me, I grew up like I got into comics probably around the same time you did, Marsh, like the '90s and the Image break. But I was reading Marvel at the time, and I uh, I was actually really big into back issues. I was, when you know, in the '90s, the X-Men comics were coming out, but I was buying the trade paperbacks of the X-Men issues from the '70s and the '80s. I was buying X Factor from the mid to late '80s. And I really, really loved the stories in them. And I was like super impressed to the point where I was put off by I was just struggling and struggling and struggling and struggling to try to make something to that standard. Like I couldn't draw anatomy that way. I was only 10 years old when I got into comics and decided I wanted to be a comic artist. And it actually, I think on one of your really big videos, you talk about how mini comics opened the way for you, and when you saw them on a shelf at a comic store and the guy behind the counter was selling and making them, that like blew your mind. And to me, I had the same experience. I didn't feel like comics were something that I could do no matter how desperately I wanted to until I picked up. I didn't pick it up actually. It was my sixth grade teacher gave me a copy of her copies of Shades of Grey to read. I was just borrowing them, but they're by, I can't remember if it's Jimmy or Jerry Gownley. And he went on to do Amelia Rules, which is like a best-selling kids graphic novel series. But at the time, he was a teenager and he was, beating the streets and going around to comic shops and writing letters to Diamond and the other distribution companies to get out. And he was just doing it. And it looked kind of manga-ish before I knew what manga was. And seeing someone that was like a few towns over from me and doing it was what really said to me, like, I could do this. And I think you have to have that moment where you see something that's more on your level and you could say, like, a real person is doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a big thing. And it makes it, approachable. Like, I don't know, like, again, from that video that I did, it's so simple. Like, it's Xerox paper stapled together, and if you want to get fancy, you put a colored piece of paper for the cover. Like, it's like I could do that, like, and I could make it in my own way. That'll be kind of cool and stuff. So, I like what Peter says here. The Claremont years were magical because Shell was talking about X-Men, and I always hear people talk about that, and I'm like, I really got to dig into those issues because that's what everybody seems to like.
It depends on which Claremont, because at some point he was on that book for over 30 years. So at some point you'll probably hit a point, and it's different for everyone, where you're like, he's jumping the shark a bit here. But for the most part, it was solid. And,
To me, when I think of Claremont, though, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't really know, but I just think of comics with a lot of words in them. And that's one thing I don't really love is a lot of words in comics. Like, I like the action to be throughout, like, and obviously there's going to be moments where it's more wordy and less actiony. But yeah, I don't know. I need a lot of movement, I guess.
if you want words, go to the back when Stan Lee was writing in the 60s. That's a lot of words.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. But the flair that Stan Lee had, like, forwards, I don't know. It's just it kind of it worked better, and also it's just that time had that kind of form of comic where everything was like redundantly said over and over in the same like panel. So I don't know. It's just a different kind of thing, I guess. I think maybe too. I wonder. I don't know. I'm kind of judging something that I haven't truly experienced, so I don't really know about the Claremont stuff. But it's funny. Like, I used to love like what is it? Calvin and Hobbes. Like, such a cool comic strip, and obviously beautiful art and everything. Most people who are into comic strips are hugely inspired by that. But one thing that was pointed out one time when I was looking into it, not too long ago, was some of that stuff was kind of over a kid's head.
Yeah.
Like, there was stuff that I just didn't really get, and that's why I feel like it was weird that I loved the art. I remember loving the art, but I did kind of feel like, I don't know, it was really easy to read Far Side and like some of these other ones, like, but that one was like not. I didn't always get it. And I feel like that could be the case with Claremont X-Men, but maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, I need to try it out again.
Everything leading up to the Dark Phoenix saga is one of the greatest comic runs on a comic ever, especially when it gets into Byrne Claremont. It's a real shame that they cannot make a movie of that storyline.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They keep trying.
Oh yeah.
Well, what's interesting is like that was an era. And this is just my own observation here. I don't claim to be right or wrong, but to me, that was an era with that particular story and that particular artist and that particular storyteller, where the level of complexity in the artwork and in the writing, because Claremont did exposition, they were talking to each other through mental telepathy, then there was dialogue, there was all these things going on when as far as the words that were telling the story, and they were almost equally as complicated as the art was. So you really had this, like, I don't know, it was like a double-edged sword. You had some of the most intricate storytelling mixed with this really intricate artwork. And I don't know, for me, it's like a masterpiece. Like that whole time was just the pinnacle of what you could do. Like that was as far as you could take it. Great art and great stories, and you can't really get better than that. You could break it down and make it simpler and smaller, but I don't think you can effectively get bigger than that was, because it's just, it's like both guys were verbose, but one was that way with their art and the other one was that way with their words. If that makes sense.
I think the only thing that may come close is the original Lee Kirby Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for some people just a little bit older than us, it was the Lee Kirby Fantastic Four, and for people that jumped in, well, actually, it's late for me. It's just because I had back issues. It was the Byrne Claremont.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I grew up with Byrne Claremont, and so back issues for me were the old Fantastic Four.
I grew up with both. Yeah, the Fantastic Four was an excellent run. I mean, just the concepts and ideas they explored in that book were like groundbreaking. And when it came to X-Men, which started with Dave Cockrum doing the art, and then I went over to John Byrne. I really look forward to the next issue on that book, and it was just like phenomenal artwork, intriguing story, and they slowly built up the characters from issue to issue. I was totally invested.
Yeah.
Looks like I'm gonna have to search out some trades or something.
You can actually, if you have an account on Amazon, if you have Amazon Prime, I think it's Amazon Prime, you can get the Phoenix, that whole storyline leading up to her becoming Dark Phoenix for free.
Yeah, I think
cool.
I think I'll definitely get into that and probably dig. I'll probably start from the beginning, where they were really starting to get at that, like Peter was saying with what's his name again? The other artist, I can't remember now.
Dave Cockrum.
Cockrum, yeah. Anybody ever read The Legion of Superheroes? Apparently, Peter has high praise for that one.
I have not. Yeah. I know quite a few people that that was their entry book into comics. As a matter of fact, Chris Claremont or John Byrne? We were talking about that. One of them, that was their entry into comics. I think one of them was like sold scripts to DC for Legion of Superheroes when they were super young.
Interesting. Let's see. Jason says, I wish Marvel could do good animated movies closer to the DC animated stuff. Yeah, man, I'm not as familiar as probably these guys are, but with that. But yeah, I know that DC's have had some cool stuff. You know, obviously the Batman series. I don't know about the movies, but the animated series was cool. They've always kind of done pretty interesting with animation. Even back in the original like Superman animations are classic.
Mm-hmm.
That was Fleischer Studios, actually, I think.
I know it's not one of their movies, but Justice League Unlimited is one of my favorite animated series of all time.
Oh yeah, good
That's-
choice.
I mean, I had Question and Huntress on my wedding cake. That's
Nice.
They weren't supposed to be on the wedding cake. They were supposed to be standing next to the wedding cake. But Mike's grandmother walked over, said, "Why aren't these on top of the wedding cake?" and smashed the action figures into the wedding cake up to knee level. So,
Oh,
Wow,
oh no, it
that's
was
harsh.
awesome. It was awesome. That turned into one
Okay.
of my favorite wedding photos.
I'd like to see that almost. Let's see. Dale, what's up? He's saying, I remember a friend had a digest of the early Fantastic Four, and I was sleeping over at his house and read the whole thing after he fell asleep. That's a pretty cool memory. I like old stuff like that. I used to read my dad's Superman comics when I went over to his house. Dr. Dave Cockrum actually designed Nightcrawler for the Legion of Superheroes. Really?
That's right. I forgot about that.
very cool.
That's interesting.
The really weird thing is Nightcrawler originally looked like a bat with blonde hair. He was a gray bat with blonde hair, and then he redesigned him to be blue with the red. But when you look at him, he actually looks like he fits in better with the Legion of Superheroes than the X-Men at the time. I think.
Oh, he's saying it was Jim Shooter. Is he saying that? Was it Jim Shooter
Oh, yeah,
who designed it?
it was Jim Shooter who sold scripts to DC when he was like 13,
14.
He was
Yeah.
14
Wow.
years
Yeah.
old, and they didn't know how old he was when he bought the scripts. And it was funny because they called him to ask him to do another script or something, and they were like weirded out by his voice on the phone.
Interesting
Yeah.
that came up today. Just for it's an inside thing, don't worry, people. But that being said, Jim Shooter is I knew that about him, that he started when he was really young, and the dude is like, I don't know, I got a lot of respect for that dude. He did some pretty cool things in the industry.
I think one of the funny things is, everyone's like, well, Dark Phoenix Saga is one of the best storylines in comics, and it was Jim Shooter who said, this is not a spoiler, everyone should know this, but it was Jim Shooter who said you had to kill Jean Grey. Chris Claremont wasn't going to do it. He was going to have a long running thing where either she got psychically lobotomized by the Phoenix, or to get the Phoenix out of her, or she was sent to prison. And actually, John Byrne flew aliens into a shot of her destroying a planet. And when the planet was destroyed, she killed millions of people. And Chris Claremont didn't write that in. He's like, "Why'd you draw that?" And he was like, "Well, I wanted to make it more exciting." So then Jim Shooter said, "Well, you just had her kill 1 million people, so you either need to have her imprisoned because she's a hero. She needs to, be held accountable for her crimes, or you should kill her. Or actually, you need to put her in prison." And then Chris Claremont said, "Well, if you're going to put her in prison, you might as well kill her." And Jim Shooter said, "Okay, go ahead." And he called his bluff because he didn't have him kill a main character. And I think it's interesting that it was Jim Shooter's editorial intervention that created one of the best storylines.
Wow. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff. He's also he was one of the few people who pushed back on when they started doing the direct market. He was one of the few people who pushed back and said, yes, the direct market is obviously a good thing for us to do, but if we neglect newsstands, then we won't have new readers.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, he was right, because now we're screwed.
Yep.
All right, let's see what else we got. Jim Shooter's my hero. Is he still doing stuff?
Actually, and this is a funny and maybe mildly disheartening thing, but he, along with a lot of people that found it hard to make money in comics, actually started an advertising agency, and they make comics they make comics for companies that are ads, essentially. It's like get people to actually pay attention to what your company wants to say by putting it in a fun comic book instead of a brochure.
Wow. Well, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess, you know?
It's true.
So, if you have, this is a kind of an interesting kind of shade on the question that we've already started with. You know, if you have read the pinnacle of what comics can be and enjoyed it as such, then what drives you to continue and do that kind of, try to do that kind of thing? What makes you not
Well,
stop?
I mean, you know, I mean, there have been, you know, phenomenal everything. So should we stop making everything? You know, like there's perfect movies, there's perfect novels, you know, there's perfect TV shows. I mean, it's more encouraging because then, you know, you want to write your perfect story, you know, with your perfect character and, you know, your perfect universe. There's always new ways to tell old stories, you know, like there's no original story that you're going to come up with exactly, but it could be more gut wrenching. It could be more, you know, action oriented. It could be more this or that, whatever your preference is, you know, because each person is a snowflake and each creation is the same, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We're all special snowflakes for sure. No, that's a good point, man. Always bringing that optimism. I like that. Yeah, I mean it's so true. I mean, it's almost like it's a challenge. It's like, okay, they just made the best thing now, but what can I do? I still have this drive. You know, how can I make my mark? You know.
Yeah.
I think it's like, you know, everything's a slightly different flavor, you know. And look at how many things are iterations of other things that you enjoy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I like the 30s Flash Gordon serials. I like Star Wars, which is the 30s Flash Gordon serials with a different spin and reinvented. I like Firefly, which is also another, you know, ragtag group of space adventurers. And I think it's kind of like, you know, if you have a best friend, it doesn't mean you stop trying to meet other people and make other friends too, you know? And even if you look at it like Watchmen, I think was a great comic. I think it kicked off a level of deconstruction that was bad for the industry in general. But you know, Watchmen is just a pastiche of all the Charlton characters mashed into a book with a different writer. So like you can be completely derivative and still come up with something original and amazing. So that's why I would say it's still worthwhile to create.
Great points. We have, let's see, Jason also has a great point. Y'all haven't seen me take my shot at the pinnacle, and I haven't seen y'all's either. I like that.
Yeah.
Peter will bring in the optimism, and then Jason will just be like, we're going to take over the world. I love it.
Well,
All right,
I've heard
Go
lots
ahead,
of I've heard lots of interviews with, lots of musicians and stuff, because that's the circles that I ran in a lot. And one that kept repeating quite often was they would interview Ozzy Osbourne, and they're like, you've been doing these albums forever and ever and ever. When are you going to stop? When are you going to retire? And he's like, I haven't written my Sgt. Pepper yet, So to him, Sgt. Pepper was the ultimate album ever made, and he's not going to stop until he does that, in spite of the fact that, he has done the huge amount of work that he's done, in fact, he outlasted the Beatles like probably 4 or 5 times over. Maybe hasn't had as many hit singles, but nevertheless, he still has had a gigantically huge career and has influenced, Black Sabbath basically created the heavy metal genre, not alone, but certainly were the huge pioneers of that. So, so why does he keep doing it? Because he feels like there's still more to do.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
And just adding on to that music, like, for instance, you could have different artists with different lyrics, but there are artists out there who have the exact same beat. It's just a different song. Just like with stories out there, you could have a story about a princess in a tower, but it could be Shrek, or it could be Rapunzel, or it could be Mario trying to save the princess from Bowser, anything like that. There's always the concept, but you can make so many stories off of that one concept.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, we could do a whole 9-volt anthology of just called "Saving the Princess," and every single story would be different.
Yeah.
Peter groaning.
Totally.
Would you say Peter's groaning? He doesn't want that.
I'm sure he wants to keep doing anthologies. It's just, every time you say it, that's more work for him. I'm actually stepping up and being more of an editor this time, so it's more work for me too, I guess. Wait, I'm gonna groan. I
like this comment here from Blaze, I guess. He says Paul and Ozzy should do an album together. That would be interesting.
On the last Ozzy album,
Totally.
On the last Ozzy album, Elton John and Ozzy put a song together, "Ordinary Man,"
which was a really good song.
It is a really good song.
It's a really good song.
Yeah, and the video it'll make you cry. If you see the video, you'll cry.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I'll have to check that out. That sounds good. We should post it in the recommended music.
I want to do a holiday special.
Well, Peter said that we should do a holiday special, but isn't it going to be close to Halloween? Shouldn't we? Maybe we should do a horror one, but maybe that's too late to do a horror one, actually.
I think so,
because
probably.
It probably won't be out quick enough. But yeah, holiday would be kind of cool. You know how many, if you go to Comic Book Plus and you look up like Santa Claus comics, there's so many weird different versions, different Santa Claus things in there.
Marvel always used to put out holiday specials too. They were great.
Yeah.
What was it? I remember the one where, what was it? Thanos gives Gamora back like a little doll that she had or something when she was young. Like Thanos and Gamora have a nice Christmas together, and really weird bizarre things too.
What if we did like a pulp version of a holiday? So like you could have Santa as a superhero or a supervillain, or Santa as a detective, or Santa as a barbarian, or
There you go.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it was discussed in the animated show or in the comics, how Santa would actually visit Darkseid and give him coal every Christmas. I read that somewhere.
True story.
Is it true?
I don't know.
oh, look at that.
I like Peter's idea, but not. You shouldn't put it out there like that, though. Somebody's gonna steal it.
Yeah,
But
that was in a
they
horror movie
won't-
called Crimbus.
But they won't do it as good as Peter would do it.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
That's true.
But yeah, I have at least one story in my back pocket revolving around Christmas where the imps investigate a Santa Claus incident. So I'd be on board for that.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of ideas necessarily for that, but I like the combination of Santa and different pulp genres. That sounds interesting.
Actually, I've read a book. I can't remember what it is. Now I wish Mike had joined us. But it's about barbarian Santa Claus, defending the Christ child and then going on to become this philanthropist who gives toys to children. I need to remember what that was.
That's cool.
So fresh ideas can keep us driven to make comics as well, I guess. Huh?
There you go.
And perpetual anthologies will keep us driven as well.
Mm-hmm.
Never-ending cycle of anthologies.
Well, that's we were talking about what drives us to keep going. And I have to say that having because there's art forums and stuff like that. Like you could go on DeviantArt or Instagram or things like that, but they're not really made for interaction. Going on the Discord every day and seeing that everyone's working on their project, or now a lot of people are working on the 9-volt anthology. Like everyone's kind of pushing each other and sharing their ideas and showing their progress, and that's super motivating too, in a way that honestly I've never really had before.
Yeah, I would definitely say community is hugely motivating.
Yeah.
And also, one thing actually I'm realizing too is whenever I would feel like I needed some inspiration, I would always go to Instagram, and I can't do that anymore because they took it away from me. And I wonder if that's been part of my problem.
I have always had a problem with the algorithm, so I
I hate the algorithm.
Invested.
I hate the algorithm. But what I would do is I would go through my feed for a little while, but I also would just kind of look up trend. I don't know if it's trends or tags or whatever, and then I'd find one artist who was really amazing, and then I'd just live on their feed for a little while. And I love that the fact that they started having it so you could save. It's like Pinterest. You could almost save little boards of different images and stuff in different categories and stuff. And I was doing that a lot too. Peter's getting angry. I don't think we would like him if he was angry. Let's see. What are you working on, Shell? Is this sketching or?
This is it's going to be next month's Imps Comics for Bexham's Bazaar. I do a one-off strip for an e-RPG magazine called Bexham's Bazaar, and I'm the rare comic artist that gets paid for their work, but I only do one strip a month for them. So it's about it's actually our Ascension Epoch characters, but while most of our Ascension Epoch characters are modern day things, this is an RPG magazine. When I pitched it, I said I'll reinvent them for medieval times. So I'm essentially doing a Elseworlds of our own characters for a medieval fantasy setting.
Awesome.
Nice.
That's cool. Let's see. I feel like I had something else to say and then I forgot. I don't know. What's everybody else working on?
I'm just writing up the anthology story.
Wow, writing and streaming at the same time, that's a feat. That's what I have to do that
Yeah,
too.
I'm just
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm just sketching here. And actually, for my 9 volt, is this too bright? This is probably too bright. Let's see. For my 9 volt story, I figured I'd maybe start designing my detective guy. So,
Sweet. What is your story going to be again? I think you might have said it last time, but remind us.
yeah, it's a retired detective. His wife recently passed away, and he starts diving into her past, and fun comes from that.
Nice. Awesome. Oh, I know what I was going to say. One thing that is really cool that inspires me is something that actually today I noticed. Actually, I can't. I'm so used to saying a lot of my inspiration is like my comic friends and stuff. I was about to say my buddy Corey Lewis, but I don't know him from anything. But Corey Lewis does. He's always been inspiring to me with his Sun Bakery comics and Shark Knife comics, and right now he's got a comic on Indiegogo called Ping, like Peng, which is the sound of a kickball when it's kicked, and it's basically it's a sports comic really, but it's interesting because it's kickball, hacky sack, and breakdancing, which I think are cool as hell. So I don't know. I love his work. He always inspires me because he's got like really good design skills. He's a great artist, but he does like this almost like it's almost like if pick your favorite artist, did kind of like what do they call it? Like cartoon modern style or something. It's simplified down to more design elements than anything else. And I don't know. I'm always super inspired by what he does. And he's also one of these guys that kind of reminds me of like Peter. He can just throw out stories left and right like it's nothing.
Yes, just seeing Peter, like his amount of stuff that he does is it makes me assess what I'm doing and be like, should I be watching YouTube right now? I should probably be drawing.
Well, I think part of it too is obviously he's got an amazing drive, but also it depends on what style you plan to draw in, because I definitely, when I draw faster, I draw a certain way than, if I draw, slower and more meticulous, and I think he likes to go that fast style, which is great. I love it. That's one thing I love about, Corey Lewis too, is it seems like he does it really fast, and because of that, like he captures so much energy. It's just like there's something to be said for not trying. Well, not to beat a drum like, but not trying to be perfect, like I've been talking about a lot lately.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that actually because and I know it looks like I'm drawing really slow on here, but I'm trying to pay attention to the conversation. Like I'm streaming with you guys first and drawing second, so it's going slower than it normally would. But when let's see if this actually shows up on here. Can it? Yep. Okay. So for the first arc, I've done two. This is the second arc that I'm working on now. But for the first arc, I would ink everything, and to be honest, it felt like I could get it done on time. I mean, I'm usually chasing a 3-year-old around, so that's work in and of itself. But I always got it done on time, but the problem with it is that, you know, I like to have a very meticulous style. And for I'm trying to figure out how to up my workflow without compromising the quality of my art. So I've had to, I'm trying this sort of watercolor-y method to see if I could, uh, trying this sort of watercolor-y method now to see if I could speed up a bit. Because I can't go into the inking detail that I'm used to when I do it in this style. So I asked the editor if I can sort of overhaul the art style to see if it would speed me up at all, and he said sure, which is great. Um, but yeah, my speed is something I've been having to look at, and I'm definitely trying new things to see if I can produce more. Because you know, it comes down to what do you want to do? Have you know, 10, you know, I'm not saying I'll get 10 books out in my lifetime of comics, but maybe I will. But do I want to have 10 really beautiful looking ones, or do I want to have 20 or 30, uh, you know, ones that tell more of the story? Because you only have, you know, sucks to say, but it's true. You only have so long to live. You're only going to be able to do so much in a finite amount of time.
YOLO. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. And that is a good question, though. Like, do you want to end your life with more story, or do you want to end your life with better story? You know, I don't know. And is better story really better than more story?
Well, in my
I don't know.
case, it's not necessarily a matter of story, it's a matter of the artwork. And
Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, you could work on a single piece forever, and maybe it's the most beautiful piece in the whole entire world. You know, if I attempted to do the Sistine Chapel, it would probably take me all my life. Michelangelo was much faster than I was. But, you know, it's the question. You have to find that balance somewhere. So I'm now experimenting and trying to find the balance.
yeah. I've noticed that I think I just need to not. I When I'm actually working on a comic or doing a drawing, I don't know. Like, I think I just try not to even think about that aspect anymore because it just takes how long it takes, you know. And I don't know. Maybe if I was, you know, Jack Kirby or something, I'd be thinking more about deadlines, you know, and putting food on the table. But I guess because I'm not in that situation, it's hard for me to just, you know, try to go faster, you know. But you could also approach it this way, as Peter says.
Also, thank you, Blaze.
I agree with Blaze, for sure.
Uh,
Happened to my screen.
I'm gonna have to try that one, Peter, because the funny thing is I'm also terrified of skiing, so that's an extra bonus for me.
Eh,
I'm just trying to imagine what drawing like that means. Like,
It means
like
drawing.
maybe we should all turn the lights off like Len over there. Maybe that he's doing it already. Oh yeah.
I read something recently, like you know, there's a lot of manga comics I love, and one of them is called Blade the Immortal, and I read something where the artist was like, I just want to put the image down as fast as possible. And it's not about perfection. It's not about being fussy. It's about being able to tell this story. And I always thought the artwork was phenomenal. And yeah, it kind of looks a little sketchy and frantic at times, you know, but I thought it was beautiful, just beautiful work, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think being a manga artist, you kind of don't have a choice. But yeah, here Anna's got a good suggestion here. I like this challenge we should do. It's like the blind drawing challenge. We'll have to draw with the other side of our brain.
So
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. What are your what would you say is like, because I think it's interesting how Peter said that, you know, he's even inspired by like comics that maybe don't have the greatest art. Do you guys ever feel that way?
Sure.
absolutely.
Can you think of like an example? Maybe you don't have to necessarily say the person, but
I'll say the person, and then hopefully this video will get really popular
Probably.
because people will light up the comments. But no, Frank Miller, especially Sin City, like, you know, Frank Miller, his stuff is pretty blocky, and you know his style is very stark. You know, his, especially when he was doing Sin City, his you know, hatching was not very well defined. He used a lot of, you know, white and black and very little in between. But he took that style and he made a story around it that really, like, you look at Sin City and you immediately know the feel he's going for. It was like very pulp and very dark and very gritty, and it was still very compelling, even though, you know, he was not John Byrne or John Romita Jr. or whoever else was drawing at the time. And it's interesting because, like, I like Frank Miller's run on. I like when he does Batman. I like when he does Daredevil and someone else is illustrating it. But you know, he comes in and he says, "Well, I can still tell a story with my art as well, and it can still be gritty and compelling." And I think Frank Miller's a great person to look at if you're ever having a day like, "Well, is my comic going to be worth it if my art isn't as good as you know, Alex Ross?" And it's like, yes, it is. It can still be. You can still tell fantastic stories.
yeah.
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to get off here. I gotta take a important phone call. Sorry,
All
guys.
right, man. Good to have you on. We'll talk to you next time.
Of course. See y'all in the next chat.
Take care, Ronnie.
Take care. Bye.
Later. Yeah, I actually, Todd McFarlane said that too. He talked about, you know, getting inspired by bad artists and stuff. And you know, obviously, good and bad in art is kind of relative, anyways. But you know, I mean, again, Corey Lewis, to me, he's not a bad artist, but you know, the kind of sometimes the sloppy way he draws is definitely inspiring, and it just shows you that you can make a pretty big impact with a sort of simple approach, or you know, I don't know, with less. You know, less can certainly be more. With comics, I got another buddy that I've talked about a few times here, and I got to get him on one of these days. I haven't talked to him in a while though, but I'm trying to reach if I can get it off the wall. Peter Palmiotti knows of Mr. Ted Secco. And this is basically what his style is like right here, like when he makes a comic. And I just love the energy. Like, I keep this always nearby for inspiration. It's just such great energy. And I don't know. I have a bunch of books by him, and he's another guy who just will knock out books like nothing. And one of these days, I got to put a link for one of his videos. He's got these videos where he like makes comic pages, and it looks like he's in like a shed with the, you know, with the lawnmower next to him or something, and he's just got like cups of ink and raw like rugged brushes, and he's just like splattering like ink on the page, and you could tell he had like a bad day at work or something, and he's just like doing it, and he's like in like less than 5 minutes he's got like a page. And you're like, what the heck did he just do? I don't know, but it's got a lot of energy. And even like put the words in there too.
I remember when I was a kid, there were lots of like comic book artists. I mean, some of them I couldn't even name now, but I just remember looking at their artwork and thinking, it's compared to some of the other ones that I really loved, like, John Byrne and John Buscema and Jack Kirby and those folks around at that time. And I would look at these other comic book artists and think, I may not be able to draw like that, but I bet I could get to this guy's level. And he was making professionally produced comics, right? And it was funny because that's also the same way I thought about music. When I was a kid, AC/DC's Back in Black came out, right? And I heard that, and and it was a huge, huge, huge album. And I heard it and I was like, I can sing better than that guy, I mean, call it ego or whatever you want. But I was just like, if he can do that, I can do it. And that actually is what inspired me to become a musician, and seeing some of the art that I didn't think that much of. And to be truthful, I didn't really understand much about any of it in music the same way. But it is what inspired me to like move, like to take those first steps and say, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to sing. I'm going to learn how to write songs. I'm going to learn how to draw. I'm going to learn how to create characters. And so all those, even things I think that are bad, can inspire you.
Yeah. Now you can get that from punk rock music too. They, especially early old punk rock, like the bar is set pretty darn low, but even within that crude type of music, there are appealing things, and there are reasons why certain bands, kind of rose to the top more, and it's interesting. And it's a very odd combination sometimes of things. Sometimes they just had maybe the more provocative, kind of message. Sometimes it might just be like they just did a full song in 45 seconds. There's like all kinds of different like things that can appeal, and when you try to kind of, it's almost like when you try to be messy sometimes, like you might find a whole new way to do something, and that always inspires me.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember looking at Steve Ditko's stuff when I was a kid. I have a much higher respect for him as an artist and as a creator now. But back in, when I was a kid, I thought to myself, he's not somebody I want to emulate. I don't really like his style all that much. But his storytelling is top notch. I mean, what he does in his panels and how he tells his story is awesome. And of course, as a kid, like I said, I didn't have the appreciation for that. But now I can look at it and go, wow, I may not have liked his style, and I may still not like his style, but the guy knew what he was doing,
Yeah, definitely. Storytelling always, good storytelling always does the trick for me. It's kind of the main number one thing you need, and if you can do that, I don't care how bad or good your art is, it's good,
Yeah, look at Beavis and Butthead. I mean, their art was terrible, but they were a sensation,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the ultimate example, I think, is XKCD. I mean, that's a funny strip comic, but it's stick figures. It's literally stick figures. But
literally
the appeal of it is, it makes niche jokes that only there's tons of them are programmer jokes, tons of them are mathematician jokes.
Mm-hmm.
He manages to be funny. It's a crude way of getting your point across, but it completely gets the point across, and most of the time it's hilarious.
Yep. And Evan brought up this one too, which is always a great one to bring up when we have this conversation. Ninja Turtles old stuff is, I don't know, that kind of looked like somebody who's trying to draw Muppets, but was just learning how to draw, to a certain degree. But it looked pretty awesome, and it was kind of inspired by Kirby at the same time, so even better. Muttman says, some people think photorealism is the highest quality comic art, but I tend to disagree. I think animated cartoon graphic style is the best kind of comic art. And, I definitely agree with your sentiment there. I don't know if that cartoon style, it depends on what you mean by cartoon, but everybody's got different thing that they like the most, but that being said, it's so true. Like, that's a huge gripe of mine, actually. I see on whatever social media, you start to look up artists, and the ones that always get like a lot of views and a lot of this and a lot of that are the people who do like very photorealistic stuff or stuff that just looks real or realistic to any degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy for somebody who doesn't know art to just be like, wow, that's amazing. But it's kind of like, it's so boring to me, honestly. I mean, it's amazing that they can get to that level, but I feel like I could get to that level too. I have no interest, to do that, except for maybe practicing. But it's far more interesting to me to see, and to his point with cartoons, like I actually have trouble doing stuff more cartoony sometimes because I have trained myself to look at reference at times and work from reference, and it's hard for me to separate from the reference and simplify, instead of, this kind of complex shape with these subtle, nuances. It's hard for me to be like, okay, I can do that in 3 lines, that's really tough. And people don't realize this kind of skill that goes into that,
Well, the other problem, and this is something that comic artists really have to struggle with marketing, is that for someone to enjoy your comic, they have to put in time and read a story. I mean, and I do a lot of illustrated novels, so it's even harder. Then there's fewer pictures to draw people into. And marketing things are tooled toward a still image. Instagram, you get one picture to, grab someone's attention. So something, a piece of art where you take a longer time to do it. If you spend 14 hours drawing one person's face, that's gonna be more impressive. And so the standalone piece of art is always going to do better when you're trying to market than when you're trying to get someone engrossed in a story. I mean, that's really hard. It's hard to get someone to invest time into something to see if they like it.
Yeah. But one thing that's cool about that is if you can get them to invest time, just the fact that they invested time will cause them to want to be more hooked to it, because that they don't want that investment to be wasted, and then they'll want to see what the next one is, maybe.
Well, the flip side, as you're kind of saying, is that when someone likes something, they like something. When someone's like, "When's the next book coming out?" It's like, well, this picture of one person's face is very pretty, but there's no story behind it. If you share some picture of your character, then, and they're like, "Oh, what's happening to the character? I know something's happening, and that this is a character, and there's a story behind it." It's really awesome to have fans that are excited about that. And I'm lucky. We do have a few, and it's a wonderful feeling. And that investment is what keeps them coming back to you. Like, if there's a landscape painter, you might want one landscape painting for your living room, or maybe you put one landscape painting in every room, but at some point you're just looking at landscapes over and over. But if there's a story to be told, you want the next book. You want to know what's happening to that character, just the same way you want to know what's happening with your friends.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of interesting ways to get people hooked onto projects, and I don't know, like the way I use tends to be, make a bunch of YouTube videos. But that doesn't necessarily like, I still got to make like a really good comic, and hopefully, I hope one day that my characters become more famous, than me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Peter says he likes my Big Wrath, the Amali, the little girl Amali, the first. I did kind of a cartoony version.
You.
Yeah, I like that one too. Unfortunately, it was a little too cartoony for the style of the comic, but yeah, hopefully, it's funny because now that's like the reverse thing that I'm trying to do now is kind of capture what was cool about that cartoony version and a little bit more realistic version of her, which is a challenge as well. Man says, I think John Buscema is interesting because he was a trained fine artist but had to adjust his style towards Kirby to follow him up on books. He developed a real animated, beautiful style. Yeah, I mean, John Buscema is the man for sure. Mark Silvestri, another example of that. Great draftsmanship, but knew how to tell a story in panels too. What's interesting is I got into Silvestri, I guess because I knew he was going to be part of Image, and so I got like the Wolverines, and I actually don't like his art in the Wolverine comics. But what somebody told me, because I didn't realize he worked on, I think, X Factor as well. And what somebody told me when I said that to them was, well, the thing is some people are just better group story artists, and some are better single, character story artists. And I think that might actually be true with him. So, but yeah, I guess the Image guys, they all like kind of looked up to Silvestri. Like he was, it was Uncanny. Yeah, I've been saying it was Uncanny X-Men. That makes sense. Yeah, I guess they all kind of looked up to him. He's like, apparently he was like the first one like really making the money too. He like had like a really beautiful house and stuff in Maui or something like that. And like this nice car or something. So in that way, but also as an artist, they all kind of looked up to him. But it's just interesting. I also heard a story where Silvestri was kind of pissed at Rob because he couldn't understand how Rob could kind of have the impact he had with his art style or something like that, which I think is pretty hilarious. But I don't know. It's interesting because all this art stuff, as much as people who are real craftsmen and there's a certain kind of artist who will say like, they'll often cite the thing of people saying like this, getting a critique, and the person with the kind of bad art says, well, no, that's just my style. So a lot of people will criticize that, which I think there is something to that. But I don't know. There's also other approaches, I think, to that kind of mind frame, like there's ways to encourage that artist instead of telling them that their art sucks,
Another artist I love is Paul Pope. Not sure if you're familiar with his work. It's very brush oriented and not at all. It's very indie, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen his art. I'm looking it up now to see kind of.
He's done like some Batman stuff, I think,
as
well. But
he didn't do. I can't remember the name of it. There was I think, an Image comic that he did. I'm sure he probably has.
Maybe. Oh, Battle Boy was that Image?
Not sure,
Batman Year 100. Dale
his
A
art,
says,
his
yeah.
art is definitely pretty cool. That's for sure. I know I've heard him before.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
reminds
I
me
love
of.
his work.
You could tell he's got some Sienkiewicz inspiration going on here.
Yeah, I just love it. Love his work. He came out. It was like years and years ago, but he came out with just giant books with his characters and stories and crazy pinups and half naked women and whatnot. It was just and like written pages of his life, and it was just fantastic work. Yeah. And everybody's
You hit
saying,
on you hit on a nerve. I think there a lot of people like it. That's cool. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to look more into it because I definitely like what I'm seeing just by a simple Google search. And that's another thing too. Is like his style. I would say is not bad at all, but it's like messy and it's purposefully messy. Another one I look at that's like that is Jim Mahfood. It's hard
right.
because I've attempted it myself because I really actually like a messy style. But it's hard to be messy and still be. I don't know. It's almost hard to do it well.
What's Ashley Wood is another
Yep.
similar, yeah,
Yeah.
artist.
It's like I like artists who just like throw ink on the page like it's nothing, and then it's like if they spilled their ink bottle, it really wouldn't matter because it would still be awesome.
Kim Holmes like that actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
But as a matter of fact, he got a huge following on TikTok by like dropping ink on the page, blowing on it, and saying what monster is going to appear out of the ink, and then doing an awesome ink piece over that.
Sweet.
How do I not know about Kim Holmes TikTok? That
He's had
makes
some
me very,
stuff blow up on
very
there.
angry.
He's had like 35,000 views on some of those. He's found himself a real
Wow.
mechanic.
I'm about to steal his thunder, man. Screw
Yeah.
that. Wow. How did I not know that though? That's like what? Anyways, Kim Holm is awesome. Like, and not only is he awesome, but he lets people have his art to use for public domain type stuff. I think he does it under one of the Creative Commons things, right?
Yep, Creative Commons attribution. As a matter of fact, we just we paid him. He got part of our Kickstarter money because we used so many images of his in Dauntless. He didn't do a single illustration for us by commission. Everything that he already had just managed to fit with what we were doing really, really well. But we threw him part of the profits because he put all his artwork out for free, and we used a lot of it.
Wow, that's awesome. I noticed that you had a piece or two in there, but I don't know how big the actual book is. I only saw a few pages, so that's interesting that you used even more and stuff. That's cool.
Yeah, it's 50 pages.
Oh wow,
We made it chock full.
awesome! I can't wait to get it. Is that that's not still available, right? You did it on Kickstarter. I know on Indiegogo you can have stuff like that still available.
We're eventually going to put it on Drive Through RPG, and we're already working on a second issue. So when the second issue goes up on, I don't know if we're going to do it on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. We're going to see how we do on different platforms. We don't know which one yet. But we're going to be selling the first one again as an option with the second one. So.
Awesome. Well then, yeah, I think we've we've been so driven about talking about being driven that we might have driven this topic into the ground. So that being said, let's go around the room again. Shell, once again, where can people find you?
You can read some of our stories, at least, for free on heroicadventurefiction.com, all one word, no spaces. You can also learn more about the Ascension Epoch and where to get our books on ascensionepoch.com. And like I said, I'm Shell Presto on most social medias.
Awesome. And then, Peter, where can people find you?
You can find me on YouTube under Peter Palmiati. Subscribe.
Awesome. And Mr. Len Jennings, how about you?
Newland Media on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Sweet. And you guys know where you can find me, donkeyjobprojects.com, and also Marsh Comics on Twitter and TikTok, where I'm going to be looking over Kim Holmes' thing and stealing all of his ideas. And and then I don't know, TikTok might not last the night anyways. Apparently they're going down, so we'll see what happens. But anyways, thanks everybody for watching. This was a great chat with the chat and with everybody here. And don't forget Ronnie Gunter. He was on here too. Go check his stuff out at, what is it, Crimson Owl?
Yep.
You
Crimson
find
Owl
that on
Comics.
all the social medias. Crimson Owl Comics. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and we will talk to you next time.
Bye.